Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you. I'd like to start off by asking, how do you describe yourself and what it is that you do?
Well, I'm a country music artist primarily. My songs have a lot of folk influence in them and some bluegrass. But I've been walking the independent artist path for over 20 years. And intentionally, actually, because I always have preferred to kind of call my own shots on what I do. But it's been an extraordinary journey, and it's been exciting to, work at overcoming challenges and things like that, and just go from sort of strength to strength, as they say.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. And so I've been looking up and reading your bio and listening to your music, and you definitely have an amazing story. Were there any experiences early on in your life that planted the seed and your interest and love of country music?
Not so much. Actually, the funny thing is that I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and growing up, we listened to folk music and some of the pop music of the day, but John Denver was a huge influence on me, as well as James Taylor and Carly Simon, people like that. Gordon Lightfoot. So country music wasn't really even in my sphere at the time.
Okay.
But then I got married in 1983, and my husband, he loved all kinds of music, and I guess he was really into rock, but he kind of got sick of it as it was coming up through the disco area and everything, and into the 80s it got kind of real electronic, and so he started listening to the country music stations, which at the time, some of the greatest artists I think that ever came out of country were out in the forefront, like Alan Jackson and George Strait, just a lot of amazing artists. So he got really hooked on country then, and I started listening to it, and that's when I fell in love with the genre as well.
Okay. So with your career, I know you didn't necessarily start as a country music musician. What did you go to school for originally?
I went to school. I took classes in piano and voice, stage performance, things like that. So I didn't know exactly that I was going to follow a path in country music, but one reason I started to take the voice classes was because I really didn't have a lot of skill with singing.
Okay.
And it's something that I wanted to learn how to develop. So, and then also just, playing an instrument is always helpful too, because it helps your ear a lot and things.
Oh yeah, definitely. When was it then when you first started performing as a country artist musician?
I would say seriously, probably in the early 90s. After I got out of school, I was teaching singing, and I had a lot of students, and I would hold recitals and things like that for them, and a lot of my students were singing country tunes, and so I sort of started singing the songs too, when we would do our shows and we'd go out in the community and do events. So there was just a lot of great songs to choose from, to be honest, and stuff that I felt comfortable singing.
Okay, that's good. When was it then you first recorded your first album and put that out?
My very first album was actually in 95, 96, somewhere around that time. My husband had sort of out of the blue one day started writing songs. He wasn't a musician or anything, but he just got inspired and started coming up with these melodies and lyrics, and they were really, really good. So we got all excited about that, so we went to the studio and recorded 7 of those songs. And it was really an awesome experience, because I had never done anything like that before.
Mm-hmm.
But we were lucky enough to have somebody at the helm, a producer who knew what he was doing. So walked us through the process, helped us figure out the arrangements and all that.
Okay. Oh, great. There's a time in the, I think, was the early 2000s or late 90s when you started collaborating with Lawton Giles. How did that relationship happen, and what was the result of that?
Well, Lawton Giles, as you've read, he was one of Patsy Cline's songwriters, along with his partner Buster Bean. But it just so happened that Lawton had a small publishing company in the town that I lived, and back then we didn't have the internet, so if you needed songs, you had to actually go to publishers and ask them to send you stuff that you could preview.
Okay.
And I remember I wrote to some publishers in Nashville, and they sent me some stuff, and it was really bad. They were like their B songs, or even less than that. But I had looked in the phone book to see if we had anything local, and I saw Lawton's publishing company listed, and I just called him up, and he said, "Well, come on up to the office." And then when I went up there, he started telling me about Patsy and all the things he had done with her, and it was kind of the beginning of a long, long relationship that's been really prosperous for both of us.
Mm-hmm. So how was it? Because I know one of the more famous songs is the "Christmas Without You" song that you had performed and recorded. How did that whole process happen of recording that song and putting it out there?
Back in 2008, I was getting ready to record a Christmas album, and I called on Lawton to see if he had any songs that he might want to show me in his catalog. And so I went down to visit him and talk about songs, and he started telling me the story of how back in 1960, Patsy had come to him and his partner Buster and asked them to write her a Christmas song. So they did. It was called "Christmas Without You," and Patsy was just ecstatic. I guess she wanted to give her fans a Christmas song. And so after they wrote it, they took the demo to her label, and the label people said, "Well, we like the melody, but we're not crazy about doing a Christmas song with you, so can you ask Lawton and Buster to change the lyrics to something more non-seasonal?" So they did. They changed it to "How Can I Face Tomorrow?" And she recorded it and released it, and it just didn't do well at all. So Lawton told me that she was pretty heartbroken about that, and just, because she really did want to give her fans her own special Christmas song.
Mm-hmm.
So all these years later, here he's telling me the story, and I said to him, "I don't even need to hear it." I said, I'm going to record that if it's okay with you. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, that'd be great if you could do it in, the way it was originally done." And I said, "Yeah." So, it came out really, really well. And since 2008, I've been promoting it. And it just started taking off every year. More and more people found out about it. And then it just got all this attention suddenly and had a bunch of honors and things. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. So I know you've had a lot of success in your career, very steadily. Where do your ideas for songs and your songwriting process come from?
A lot of times they just come from observing things that are going on around me. I rarely do I sit down and just make something up. It's got to come from somewhere. So typically, like some writers, they'll write the music first and then they'll do the lyrics. And like my husband always does it both at the same time, but I tend to write the lyrics first, and then I'll go and put the melody to it. It's just, for some reason, I always feel like the lyrics drive the melody. And I've tried doing it other ways, but it doesn't ever work out for me as good as when I just write the lyrics first.
Okay. So with a lot of the things that you've done, and with your music, it's oftentimes so personal. Are there times where you feel a little bit maybe unsure of yourself? And how do you overcome those instances? Or even like in your early days, if you ever had stage fright, how do you overcome that idea of fear and putting yourself out there?
Well, I had kind of an interesting background with this as a kid, because I really wanted to sing, and I expressed that to everyone that I knew practically. And I was really ridiculed pretty bad by my family, by people in my environment who I would share this with. So, obviously it didn't stop me, but especially early on, I carried a lot of subconscious beliefs about myself and what I was capable of. I knew that I could probably become a halfway decent singer, but I don't think that I really believed that I could take it very far back then. So that's really been my biggest obstacle. I think now I'm okay with myself and where I'm at, but just trying to figure out how I could change my thinking so that I could attract into my life the success that I really knew I could achieve. Mm-hmm. And I did that through all kinds of ways. I read a lot of books about the mind and how our thoughts control our actions. I did a lot of journaling, a lot of, for lack of a better word, meditation and affirmation, and trying to clear out the old thoughts and replace them with positive things that were serving my desires.
Mm-hmm. Were there any particular books that come to mind that you thought were very helpful in this instance?
The first book that I read was Think and Grow Rich. And I don't know, I guess I was just ready for the book because it was like manna in the desert to me. It helped me make sense of a lot of the things that have been going on in the past. And I realized that I didn't even have any clue that my thoughts, not my conscious thoughts, but my subconscious thoughts were controlling everything that was happening to me. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Oh, yeah.
But, that was a key for me, because once I realized that, then the question was, okay, so how do I uncover what these are and wipe them out or replace them with things that are going to help me along this journey in a positive way? So then I just started reading book after book, and I went through this program called The Secret of Deliberate Creation. Mm-hmm. It was an audio program by Dr. Robert Anthony, and he sort of took what is in Think and Grow Rich and took it to another level. And that 8-week audio program was life-changing for me. So many light bulbs went on. And I think it was then I started to really be able to do some serious work on my thoughts. And it made a huge difference. As soon as I started to do it, I started to see progress. I mean, I would meet people suddenly that were able to help me and get me along to the next step, that were supportive, and it really did change everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. I'm curious then, because you said that you're kind of working independently, what are you working on now, and what steps do you take with this current landscape to make sure that your music still gets out there?
Well, I've been writing songs, and actually my husband has been too, and we're collaborating on some stuff as well for a new project that I hope to get underway maybe later this year or in early 2018. I have just, as an artist, I have really grown in my abilities to deliver a song, to produce a song, everything. Mm-hmm. So these new songs are really, they're just kind of taking me to the next level.
Okay.
And they're stretching me more than I've ever been stretched, and they're allowing me to sort of just